Janet Isaac, the chairperson of Youth Advisory Panel with Plan International. We also have Wani Stephen, Deputy Secretary General of the South Sudan Bar Association. We're also glad to have on board Jacqueline Nasiwa, the Executive Director for Center for Inclusive Governance, Peace and Justice. And also I am so happy to have with us Mary Ajit, who is the team lead of Journalists for Human Rights. It's good to have you all on board. Okay, starting our discussion right away, and this question goes to all the panelists. South Sudan has faced numerous challenges regarding human rights and accountability in the past decades. So what are some of the key human rights issues that South Sudan is currently facing, and how would you assess the country's progress in addressing them? You start. You can use both of them.
Do you want to start?
Yeah.
Mic are we using?
Both. Yeah, use both.
Okay.
It's on, just start.
All right. I don't think so. All right. First of all, thank you so much for welcoming us here. I'm so pleased to see the room is full of young people. As I was sitting back there, I realized that I'm still young, very young, but I realized that there are other generations who are coming. And it's time for us now to, to step away and, let them lead. So I'm really happy to see that the room is full of young people, as you guys are. My name is Wani Stephen. I am the Deputy Secretary General for the South Sudan Bar Association, as she has mentioned earlier on. So I am one of the executive in the Bar Association that have been recently elected. And from the Bar Association perspective, we think we've conducted several analyses, and what we have identified is that there is huge human rights violations, especially when we look into arbitrary arrest in South Sudan. Across the country, people are being arbitrarily arrested without due process and without due procedure. This is something that is very alarming to us as the South Sudan Bar Association, and we think in the coming year there is a need for all actors. I've seen my senior colleague from Ministry of Justice here and other dignitaries, so there is a need for us to promote access to justice and rule of law. So one, there is huge issues or huge concern on arbitrary arrest. Second, as much as we sit in Juba and we can access some of the justice institutions, we can access the courts, we can access police stations in different parts of Juba as a city, but it's not the same case across the country. You go to some places, there is no courts, right? In Magui, for example, apart from Nimule, there is no other court across. So people are unable to access justice. If anything happens for you in, let's say, Palataka, for example, you will either have to go all the way to Torit, to find redress, or to Nimule. So that is a huge concern, which means justice is not accessible by everyone. Okay. So from the legal perspective, I think, and as the Bar Association, we are focusing more on human rights violations that justice related. And also, I think, let me not talk too much, let me leave the opportunity for some of my colleagues. Okay. So yes, I'll just mention two, access to justice and rule of law, and then arbitrary arrest.
All right, thank you, Wani. Let's hear from Mr. Amara.
Okay, hello. Thank you so much. This is a very nice question regarding the human rights issues that we're facing in the country. As a human rights advocate, I've actually been the helm of protecting human rights defenders across South Sudan. And as you see from my pledge, I've always pledged to protect human rights defenders. We found that at the meantime, as we continue to advocate for human rights, it appears like many of us step into the toes of other people who have a vested interest. And therefore, we found out that actually a lot of human rights defenders have fallen into problems because of doing their legitimate work in terms of protecting human rights. At one point, my colleague here from the bar, we had to also use the office of the bar in order for us to also litigate. So we had run to them. They had also defended human rights defenders. Of course, we give the services. Of course, we have to run to them, so help us in order to protect the human rights defenders across the country. So the idea of what he said actually earlier on, that we still have a number of arbitrary arrests ongoing in the country. And for us, actually, like particularly in my office, that deals with the protection of human rights defenders and also trying to amplify the voices of human rights defenders across the country. It has always been hectic. Sometimes we have sleepless nights, by the way. So these things happen across the country, but you're supposed to respond in a very swift and in an emergency manner. So that has been one of the problems that we have. To respond to the needs and the protection needs of the human rights defenders is one of the things that we have been grappling with. And secondly, as an issue, Honorable Justice actually alluded that some of us do not have a case, and activists in this country have not been able to put themselves in the correct picture, because for you to claim something, you must build a case. And in our regard, it has been very difficult for many of our activists, and that's why you see we have a number of institutions in South Sudan. A lot of organizations are in South Sudan, but the fact is that to push for the rights of citizens and to represent the voices of others has been very difficult. Professor Aleron said, really we have these rights, but do we get these rights? Do we get it? We don't get these rights most of the time. So it is very important that the aspect of monitoring, documenting and reporting, some of these things are missing. So preservation of evidence is missing. Mr. Camilo said, okay, we need to promote transitional justice in this country. How do we promote? This is a human rights issue. You know that a lot of human rights violations happen in this country, but then how do we make these people accountable? It is really impossible. So that is a problem if we don't have evidence. We don't have evidence. And that's why most of the time we have been urging the government, please, we want the mandate of the UN Human Rights Commission in South Sudan to be renewed. And we have been pushing for that for several times, because we know that the UN Commission for South Sudan, Human Rights Commission for South Sudan, is definitely going to help us to preserve the pieces of evidence. And those pieces of evidence will definitely help us to push for the protection and accountability purposes that will happen in the Republic of South Sudan. So in that regard, it is still very important that we really focus so much in terms of preserving evidences and pieces of evidence through documentation, monitoring, and all those issues that I have earlier on said. Now, in terms of trying to amplify our voices, we think that this is a concern because currently we do not have mechanisms that we use in order to channel, especially to pressure the government to respect the obligations, fulfill the obligations that we know all states have obligations in terms of fulfilling the enjoyment of these human rights. But our mechanisms have not been enough. Even awareness itself has not been enough. So sometimes when we use international mechanisms, especially the UN Human Rights Council and also African Commission on Human and People's Rights, still it is not binding mostly on us. So those mechanisms have always been not effective much, although they create an avenue to pressure the government, at least to acknowledge some of the enjoyments of these rights. So therefore, our mechanisms are not yet suitable enough for us to respond, but hopefully with a due process, this will definitely happen.
All right, thank you so much, Mr. Amara. Mary Ajit, journalists play a very critical role when it comes to holding individuals accountable by exposing human rights violations. So how do you navigate the challenges of reporting on sensitive stories here in South Sudan, especially when it involves risk?
Thank you. I will first start by holding the SPLA, which is the SSPDF now, accountable. That on July 1983, the first manifesto in which SPLM was founded had an article on rule of law and human rights. 1983. That is 35 years later after the declaration of the International Human Rights. And it read, human rights and people rights will be firmly embedded in the Constitution of the New Sudan. All persons are equal before or under the law in the spheres of political, economical, social, and cultural life, and in every other respect, and shall enjoy equal protection of the law. I start there because when we report as journalists, we are told you are the voices of foreign agents, voices of regime change. Was SPLM founded on foreign architects of regime change? No. It means that we have actually slid out of the original foundation of the country, South Sudan, which was founded by SPLM. I start from there because when we start with the issue of protection of journalists, we have seen how journalists language inside prisons, police cells, without even us talking about the issue of access to justice. Because in my records until today, all the years that I have been advocated for media freedom and freedom of expression, the few journalists that have appeared in court have only appeared under the juries in terms of deciding what the government wants, or the individuals who think that they have been defamed, not within the framework of the law. So when we talk about protection of the journalists, you have already seen how journalists have now resort to self-censorship, forcing the media houses, and the recent case was iRadio. When the media try to speak to truth, to power, you say, no, I was caught out of context. And that out of context, you force the media houses to apologize. So then, what do we want as a nation? And I have been talking to individuals, even here in this forum, asking, do you have a word human rights in your local language? And every other person I have asked confirm that they have human rights in their local language. Is there anyone in this room that doesn't have a human rights in their local language? If there is no one, then why do we associate human rights to be a foreign issue? When we as South Sudanese, we are architects of human rights. And that takes us to the issue of media freedom and freedom of expression. Radio SPLA was formed so that SPLA can send their voices, you know, for the world to know what was happening in Southern Sudan by then. But now that the same liberators are the one in power, they don't want the world to know what they are doing in terms of corruption, in terms of how they are governing and managing the country. So let us take it home as young generation, that the moment we accept to work in any sector in South Sudan, we have to be accountable to the public. And the only means is through the media, accessing information and sharing that information with everyone so that citizens can be informed and they can make informed decisions. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mary Ajit. I would also love to remind our panelists to be short and brief in their points so that we finish our discussion in time. Madam Nasiwa, from the perspective of the civil society, what role do you play in advocating for accountability and human rights here in South Sudan?
Okay, thank you very much. And I would like to probably make this one quote from myself. That says, if we want to move forward, and then we need to recognize that all of us are human. And I think that is the first thing that will make us to respect each other regardless of who you are. And this is where we can avoid issues that create a lot of violations of these rights. In terms of what we do, or what I do as an individual, and also the organization that I founded, the Center for Inclusive Governance, Peace and Justice, we work on human rights issues. And in these human rights issues, we work with communities who are affected with conflict. And in this matter, we also focus on conflict-related sexual violence. And I could say that one of the challenges we have is the gender-based violence. And this includes conflict-related sexual violence. We are having the largest network of survivors in South Sudan. It's called the Survivor Network of South Sudan. And these ones, we work mainly with women who are abused, whose rights are violated during conflict, and also children who are born out of rape. And for this group, we are supporting them with psychosocial support, income generating activities, and also supporting these children to be enrolled in schools. The other thing we do is creating awareness around human rights, where we held a campaign called Know Your Rights. And in this Know Your Rights, we have it both in audio and in visual, and it is used for dialogues in the community,